What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fourth and Frames, the IDP edition podcast here, getting you ready for Week 17, aka Championship Week for most of you, not all of you. But go on a limb there and say for most of you here in the fantasy football world. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards, and with me, we got Nate Markham here at Fantasy and Frames and Mike Wohler for 444 Football. How you doing, Mike? It's been a while.
What's going on, fellas?
Getting ready for championship weekend, stressing in some leagues and kind of coasting in others. And let me ask you a question, Mike. If you're eliminated, let's say in the semis, or if you're eliminated in the not making the playoffs at all, do you care about consolation or not really? Do you enjoy just the game for the sake of the game, or does it have to be something on the line in the consolation to actually still be engaged?
In terms of football?
In terms of fantasy football.
I mean, I stay engaged just because I kind of have to. So, because I'm still providing info, still providing content. So I didn't make any playoffs. So I'm kind of glad I didn't, honestly.
Takes the pressure off.
There's no pressure, but I would hate just to have a good team just ravaged, like especially with what happened last week, and now all of a sudden they're changing the rules. Oh yeah, now it's 5 days instead of 10 days. I'm like, oh great, that would have been fantastic to have last week. So your team got completely ravaged by an illness, and it's like, okay, now instead of starting this guy, I'm starting a third stringer, and great, you got me 1.2 points. So I'm kind of glad in the sense that maybe I didn't, but no, I'm still paying attention, and hopefully I've said this a few times, I know, and some people will say no, but I almost like it when the people who follow me or the people who subscribe to 444 and pay to read my stuff, I'd almost rather have them make the playoffs than me make them, because they're plunking down money to read my stuff, and they're paying to see my rankings or whatever, and they're listening to what I have to say. I'd almost rather have them make the playoffs and be successful over me sometimes. So I'm still getting a lot of questions, and people are still asking me questions on who to start, so that's definitely a good thing. So that means they made it. So
hey, I mean, that's what it's all about. Totally admire and respect that. It is something when you get people saying, hey, you helped me win a fantasy title, or you helped me have a really good fantasy season. And I'll say this, for me as an analyst, it's kind of like you do all the research on all the players during the season, and then you're giving advice, and people will tell you, well, what do you grade my roster, or what do you think of my start sit, and you're like saying, oh, this is really good. And then I don't know about you, but I sign up for a ton of leagues, and then I always go back through them as I'm giving advice throughout the season, and I'm like, what the hell were you thinking on draft day?
Most of my teams got tanked because I didn't diversify enough, and I went all in on I had way too many bad players, and not that they were bad when you drafted them, obviously, but I had way too much Chris Carson, and way too much Allen Robinson, and way too much Robert Woods, and it just kind of sunk. So right from there, and I wasn't ready to I had that FOMO. It's like, okay, if I drop these guys, they're immediately going to go off.
Right, of course, especially Allen Robinson. That was the hardest one for me to drop all season. Yeah, I was like, all right, I'm finally going to do it. Fine. Nate Markham, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm not in any playoffs for any IDP or the championships for IDP side, which is disappointing. It's like Mike said, I would have really been frustrated if I had Darius Leonard out last week as a result of COVID or one of the big names, but that goes on the offensive side too.
And especially with him getting called out, I think hours before, people probably didn't even see that because it's obviously Christmas.
Exactly.
So you got your lineup set, and you're like, all right, well, I either can't get away, or you're thinking you're golden.
Mm-hmm. And that's the same. It's a comparable to in a, I don't want to say super flex, but losing your quarterback from a point scoring standpoint. I mean, that's a 15 point plus, kind of a floor that you're giving your opponent if they didn't have that same situation. Hell, I didn't take them out of my rankings, unfortunately, and so that killed, that hurt that aspect of it. But all in all, I'm doing well. I'm prepared, I think, this week as much as can be from the offensive side. Still a couple ones. You listen, and I don't know, Mike, how many different podcasts you listen to or how much content you take in from others, but it never fails that the 2 or 3 content creators that I follow along and read their work and trust their input all have varying opinions on my biggest or most complicated positions.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Today was switched, and now I'm thinking, should I really start Trey Lance over Joe Burrow? Is that a legitimate thing that I should do now? Because I've heard a few compelling arguments, and I hate that. That's the one thing I hate. I'd rather. Or here's a question I heard today, and I'll ask both you guys. Mike, I'll start with you. You're in championship week, and you lose. We know you lost. Would you have rather lost by a point or lost by 40?
Ooh, I'll tell you what.
I think I'd rather get boat raced, because when you lose by a point, you're like, well, crap. If I started this guy over this guy, then I win. I think in this case, I think I'd rather get boat raced and just have no matter what I did, doesn't matter. You just ran into a buzzsaw. There's nothing you can do. I think I'd rather get boat raced.
Me too. Jorge?
It depends on the money involved. So if I'm getting something for second place and it's kind of like okay, I'm okay with getting blown out. But if it's just one person gets the pot and I lose by a small margin, that's gonna burn a lot. So it's. I think I'm with you guys. I agree with you. I'd rather just get blown out if I'm going to lose. It's otherwise it's just too much. Too much stress. Too much stress.
When you lose by a point, it's agonized. You're like, because you're just looking at your roster. It's like I was agonizing between these 2 players and these couple of players, and I made the wrong decision.
Yep.
Well, and not only that, like with IDP leagues and different platforms that you can use, whether it's Sleeper or ESPN or what have you, MFL, whatnot. It sucks is if you have a 1 or 2 point, victory on your side or loss on your side, because it's like you can't celebrate. You can't celebrate until Wednesday or Thursday when stat corrections go through, because that's always how it ends up being for IDP leagues. And it's kind of like a couple weeks ago, my wife lost by a point to one of my friends in our home league, which is an IDP league also. And 3 days later, due to stat correction, she got a 4-point stat corrections for her IDP players, and that's how she advanced in the playoffs. And it's kind of like, man, it's too much. It's too much.
In 4for4, yeah, we've got a husband-wife battle going. It's hysterical. Someone tweeted at the 4for4 handle. It's championship week when you're facing your husband and he changes the 4for4 password without you telling him. Without him telling you. So we chimed in and was like, yeah, here's this link. Here's a link for a free trial. That should cover you for the week.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
That's great. I like that.
Got a question from a friend, David Ibrahim here. Elijah Mitchell or OBJ in a flex? If Mitchell plays, I think you start Mitchell. That's kind of where I'm going with that. I think the running game is going to go stone cold crazy on the Houston Texans this week. Unless Nate, you disagree, or
I won't disagree. No, I'm
good with Mitchell.
Yeah, Mitchell. I don't like the. I'm glad that there's not it's not a Thursday matchup you have to worry about, or a Monday night scenario either. So you don't have to try to play the clock.
Right. All right. So what we're going to do this week is very simple. Each of us is taking a position. And we're going to give you 3 people that we're high on and 3 people that we're not so high on this week. And we're not calling them busts. We're not calling them winners. We're going to say that these are people that you should either temper your expectations for, or be prepared to be pleasantly surprised by. Obviously, we're not going to give you names of players that we think are going to completely crater your chances here, because our goal is, of course, help you win fantasy titles this week if you are playing for your fantasy championship in week 17, which, like I said earlier in the show, I know a lot of you are. So let's get started with the defensive line position. I believe that is Mike. Why don't you get us started on a few players that you are high on for defensive line?
Yeah, if you guys really like Jeffrey Simmons, anytime you can take advantage of the left side of the Miami offensive line, you do it, and that's where Jeff Simmons' primary plays. So he should find himself lined up on Liam Eichenberg and Austin Jackson. So if he can get around those two guys, that's going to bode very, very, very favorably for Mr. Simmons. If you watched the Saints game, they had, I mean, that left side just has complete trouble. It seemed like Davenport was whoever was lining up on Eichenberg, Davenport, everybody. I had there was somebody who was who I recommended Davenport to, and I think it was like within the first couple of plays he got the strip sack, and I DM'd him like, dude, Davenport strip sack right off the bat. So he's like, yeah, I ended up coasting. So definitely Jeffrey Simmons. I think Eichenberg has allowed 9 sacks and 8 quarterback hits. Austin Jackson, 2 sacks, but 6 quarterback hits, but 46 total quarterback pressures. So that is not a very good, the left side is not a very good side on their offensive line. Another guy like Charles Harris this week against Seattle. Dwayne Brown hasn't been horrible over the last couple of weeks, but he has allowed 8 sacks, 32 total quarterback pressures. Russell Wilson has been responsible for his own sacks. He sometimes just holds onto the ball for too long. He tries to do what, he tries to move around, tries to, create plays. I don't know if that's the type of, I don't know if he has that magic anymore, but he can sometimes hold the ball too long. So Charles Harris, Jeffrey Simmons, and I think I'm probably a little higher on William Golston this week. I know a lot of people like also Joe Tryon, but either way, they're going to need some help on the defensive line with Tampa, with Shaq Barrett out for the season. And I even think JPB is still nursing an injury, so I think he might be even out too. With Golston, he kind of plays both interior and outside. He's played 442 total snaps, 43% on the edge, so he could see a little bit more edge snaps this week. Over the last couple of weeks, almost a 21% pressure rate. He had 2.5 sacks last week. He should match up over Gary Van Roten, who's allowed 37 total pressures. He has PFF pass block grades of under 60 in 4 straight. And he had a 35 grade against Jacksonville, which is just astounding considering Jacksonville has absolutely no pass rush. So those are the 3 guys I like this week on defensive line and edge.
It's been funny you mentioned Liam Eichenberg. Just wow, so bad when you go and you sort through on PFF with most pressures allowed by an offensive lineman. It is really, really horrible. Good call on the Marcus Davenport poll or person last week. I did not know that Shaq Barrett is out for the year. I thought he was just out for the regular season and he was going to come back for the playoffs. He's out for the year.
Oh, well, over? I mean, if that's either way, he's out for the remainder of the regular season. So
you mean like
he's out anyway. Gotcha. So he's out anyway. But
Gotcha. That's what I was confused about. All right, let me go over some linebackers that I'm a little bit higher on than the Fantasy Pros expert consensus rankings as of today. Let's start with Joe Sherbert. He's currently the linebacker 29 going against the Cleveland Browns. Using Fantasy Pros scoring the past 3 weeks, he's the LB 18 in total points scored. When you look at weeks 14 through 16, he's very balanced when it comes to tackles. Like normally you want your linebackers to have a higher solo to assist tackle ratio. He's pretty balanced. So, PFF has him as 9 apiece for solo and assisted. Cleveland is allowing the 6th most points to the inside linebackers. They're coming off a performance last week where Devondre Campbell just went to town for 13 total tackles and 20.3 fantasy points. Sherbert during this period has been averaging 12 fantasy points per game. And the last time he played the Browns, he had 9 total tackles for a total of 15.3 points. Give me the points. Give me the offense here for Cleveland, which is predicated on the running game here. I don't think you have to worry about opportunities from Devin Bush. I think he's probably been one of the more disappointing inside linebackers on the season. I certainly was not expecting him to have this poor of a showing this year. I don't know whether that's coming off the
On the COVID
ACL.
list too. And I think he's still on the COVID list too.
Right. Oh, so that will definitely.
Yeah, he didn't play last week. That's why I'm like, wait. I thought maybe he just got benched. I didn't even realize he got put on the COVID list last week. So, but yeah, he's still on the COVID list too. But yeah, Bush was definitely a disappointment either way.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's just coming off of the ACL, just needed another year to get. I don't know. It for whatever reason it didn't work out well. Next, I'm going to give you right next to Joe Sherbert is Patrick Quinn, LB28, going against the Rams. The Rams, when it comes to fantasy points to linebackers, they are not. They're middle of the road. They're middle of the road on the season. That being said, you're noticing the Rams getting back to their McVay, Shanahan roots of running the ball more. You're seeing more running opportunities, which is great for linebackers getting those tackles. He's LB12 in solo tackles, weeks 14 through 16, averaging 11.4 fantasy points per game. Week 16 versus Cincy, he got you 13.8. Week 15 for the Green Bay, 18. These past 3 weeks, he only has a 7.7 missed tackle percentage, which is lower than his season average, which is 9.4. So he's definitely coming into his zone. He's rounding out pretty well, getting to the ball, and he is the LB5 in run stopping percentage based on a minimum of 50 snaps played by an inside linebacker. So with Sony Michel running the ball more for the Rams, I would not be surprised if Patrick Queen gets you another consistent scoring somewhere between that 13.8 and 18-point performance this week. And then last but not least, linebacker that I'll give you some backstory. When Demario Davis was with the Jets and he had the massive tackle number, I think it was like the LB1 or LB2 in total tackles for that season, his last season in New York before he went to New Orleans, I was like, man, this is a fluke. How did the Jets let this, how did they cultivate this talent? How did they get this player to do X, Y, and Z? Then you flash forward a couple of years. Oh, they got another linebacker who's just a tackle machine in Neville Hugh, and they let him go. And that's who I'm talking about, Neville Hugh at the LB52. He was placed on the COVID list earlier this week, but he quickly cleared protocols. He has definitely supplanted Christian Kirksey at inside linebacker. Back-to-back weeks, back-to-back games, averaging 10 total tackles and 12 fantasy points each game. San Francisco's allowing the 7th most points to inside linebackers. He is a go for me. Nate, who do you got for defensive backs?
Yeah, noticed I went deeper into the ECR than it looks like initially I was going to, but I think that with weeks like we've had with COVID creeping up, sometimes you have to have a potential waiver wire guy available that I'm higher on, and I'm not quite sure if two of the three, but I would like to believe that MJ Stewart might be available in your league. Mike, you know a lot more about Mr. Stewart than most of us, I'm assuming, would. But what's crazy is if you look at the last 2 weeks, he's number one amongst all the defensive backs in Fantasy Pros IDP scoring. He's been kind of the Swiss Army knife for Cleveland. They've asked him to step up with the amount of COVID-related situations now with no Troy Hill, Ronnie Harrison, John Johnson, etc. And I mean, what I've seen is that he's played in the slot effectively, which against Pittsburgh is going to be one of the keys in terms of, that baseline floor that I like to establish. L'Jarius Sneed led the team in tackles last week against the same kind of slot corner format over the year. Pittsburgh in general has been pretty generous to the slot position. Pittsburgh, if you look at the point scoring allowed to the safety position, it ranks near the bottom. That's where MJ Stewart's a little more of advantageous in the fact that he's more that nickel slot in role this week. And, again, when he's the ECR is 54 overall defensive back, not somebody that you probably are too concerned with having a bust type week, he's somebody that you're probably going to slot in. But, I think you could do worse than the number 1 point scorer over the last 2 weeks and the team's leading tackler over that same time span. Is there anything about MJ Stewart that might be different news that I've seen?
Well, with right now, Troy Hill, I know he got a knee injury. Mm-hmm. He got on the COVID list, but he's been activated from COVID, but he didn't practice. He hasn't practiced over these last few days. So
that's what I'm seeing as well.
If he does, that might have to put a little bit of a pause. But as of right now, he's not practicing. So as of right now, not too bad of a call.
Yeah, and that's again, if you're listening or watching this and you have a chance to pick him up, please follow along and see if Troy Hill plays. Just to know that's going to eat into the snaps, and you have to have. I mean, the amount of snaps he's played is pretty incredible, considering from a hybrid type role that he's taken on between safety and corner. Mm-hmm. It's pretty impressive. Someone that has gone under the radar for me more so than I think it should have been. And another person who's been under the radar, but the last 2 weeks again, Jeremy Reeves. Landon Collins is out. Jorge, just coincidentally, I have the two guys of both your two teams, not by design. This is not Nate sucking up on the last week, but it checks some balances, I think is what they say. Nice. MJ Stewart's number 1 in fantasy pro scoring. Jeremy Reeves is number 7. Jeremy Reeves, like MJ Stewart, has led Washington in tackles over the past 2 weeks. 30% of the snaps in the box. If you look at Philly, they've transitioned over the last really month and a half now to a true run-heavy team. And Jordan Howard, if he plays, I elevate Jeremy Reeves even more. If he doesn't, I think they might rely more on Jalen Hurts. I mean, if there's anything, Hurts has been able to, Washington's secondary is pretty atrocious. But I still don't think Philly 100% gives the keys to the Lambo, or well, for Philly, let's be honest, to the Honda Civic of Jalen Hurts. But he has the motor and the skill set to do damage. So that I think Jeremy Reeves would be in a pretty decent spot again. And I mean, he's ECR's 45. I have him as a bottom, high end DB1, low end DB2 on the week. And I mean, that's a pretty significant jump. And then third is one that's not quite as more is something to follow along. Kari Willis was activated today with Darius Leonard. If I don't have too many superlatives to go into, if Kari Willis is on the field, he's in my defensive back 2 borderline, 1-2 conversation all the time. And he's ECR 26 right now. I think that has a lot to do with the injury designation or the COVID designation. But we'll see as he should play. Everything is leading to me seeing him play. I like the matchup. I like everything about Kari Wills outperforming what I say it was DB. Yeah, 26. Mm-hmm. So
I'm still stuck on the fact that you call the Philly offense a Honda Civic. Like, haven't they graduated up to like Mini Cooper status at least by now with Jalen Hurts playing lights out? Or
see, I don't like Mini Coopers though. They've been very. I think they're kind of.
All right, I'm just saying. All right, fair enough. All right, let's go to some players that we're maybe not so high on right now. Let's go back to defensive line and back with Mike. What do you got for us, buddy?
A little bit, probably gonna be a little bit lower on Robert Quinn this week. I know it's the Giants, but Quinn typically lines up on Andrew Thomas's side of the field, and Thomas has been really good over the last several weeks. He's only allowed 1 sack since week 11, and that was the only sack that he has allowed all season. He's allowed just 3 quarterback hits and 16 total pressures. He only has 1 game where he's allowed over 3 quarterback pressures, and that was against the Chargers of week 14. Other than that, it's either 1 or 2, and he has done a really good job of stoning edge rushers. So I'm going to be a little bit lower on Robert Quinn this week. Frank Clark is another. He's kind of been he has those bouts of inconsistency. Next thing one thing he can look like a world beater. pretty solid pressure rate, but then the next he kind of just disappears. But this week, he should be matching up on Jonah Williams of the left tackle, and Williams has had a really solid 4 weeks. Burrow, he's done a really good job of protecting Burrow's blind side. I thought I wrote some stats down, but apparently I didn't. But I know he has not allowed very many sacks or very many pressures over the last several weeks, from what I remember looking up. Burrow's doing a really good job of getting the ball out, and I'm definitely not as high on Robert Quinn. And Marcus Davenport, who we were talking about, huge game last week, but I do believe Tennessee is getting back all of their starting offensive linemen this week. They've all been activated from the COVID list. So instead of backups, he will be matching up on the starters. Taylor Lewan has actually been pretty decent grading wise. So I'm going to be a little bit lower on Davenport, maybe more DL2, DL3. Not a total bust, but I'm tempering my expectations on Davenport. We'll probably bump him down in my rankings a little bit after seeing the news on their offensive line. So those are kind of the three guys that I'm a little bit down on this week.
All right. Let me go to linebacker. So let's start with your highest ranked one or lowest ranked one, depending on how you're counting. Alex Singleton currently is listed as the LB15. Going against Washington. Washington is allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points inside linebackers. He has a 20% missed tackle rate the past few weeks. Not great. I look back at his performance. Week 16, he was the LB1 overall in fantasy points in Fantasy Pro scoring with 11 total tackles and 27.5 points. Of course, that defensive touchdown helped boost his numbers there. You go back to week 15, however, he's the LB28. You go back to week 13, he's the LB45. The way Philadelphia has been playing in terms of just point production, I can see Washington, having to kind of play from behind and trail a lot, which means you're going to see more passing game work here, especially to the running back position. Philadelphia is really good. He ranks middle of the pack in run defense. Therefore, I see a lot of more passes out of the backfield, and he is just not great in coverage. TJ Edwards, on the other hand, fantastic. Makes all his tackles. He's a good boy. He eats his chunky soup before every game like Donovan McNabb back in the day. Does great stuff. Alex Singleton, a little bit more of a liability. That's why I don't see him performing at his LB15 mark, according to Fantasy Pros ECR this week. Next one up is Tremaine Edmonds. Look, I get it. Atlanta. They run the ball. You look at the past couple linebackers. Fred Warner had 9 total tackles against Atlanta. For the Detroit Lions, Reeves Maben had 8 total tackles. You look at for Carolina, Shaq Thompson. Look, all these linebackers are fantastic and have played fantastically versus the Atlanta Falcons. They've gotten you a high double-digit fantasy point production. That's great. The only problem here is it's Tremaine Edmonds who has the highest missed tackle percentage on the team on the Buffalo Bills at the linebacking position. Is he in a great spot? Yes. Should this be a cakewalk for him? Sure. But I have never been 100% on board of being a truther or a huge fan of Tremaine Edmonds. I don't know if he's going to be able to take advantage of this great opportunity that's in front of him. You look back, week 16, LB31, week 15, LB56. I'm not seeing the LB19 production this week, even though it is a great matchup here. And then last but not least, Fred Warner versus Houston. We were talking on Fourth and Frames yesterday about what we're expecting from this 49ers offense, whether it's going to be the Trey Lance show running it, whether it's going to be Elijah Mitchell and Debo running it, coincidentally. I see this game getting out of hand quickly for Houston. I feel the time of possession is going to be on San Francisco's side of the ball tremendously, which means game script is not going to be in the Houston Texans' way. They're not going to have time to feed Rex Burkhead 22 attempts for trying to get him to the 149 mark he had last week. You're not going to see that. They're going to have to throw the ball. They're going to have to rely on Davis Mills, who has not been playing horribly at least from a fantasy perspective, in the passing game for Houston. I see that being more of the way the Texans are going to approach this game, which is going to limit the tackle upside there for Fred Warner in the middle. So give me, or don't, I'm not saying bench Fred Warner if you have him. I'm just saying temper your expectations here. So that's where I'm going with the linebacking position. Nate, you got something for us for a defensive back?
Yeah, and I feel terrible too, because on the heels of, and again, just like you said with Fred Warner, this is a temper expectation. This is not that I would never start him. I'm as big a Jordan Poyer fan as there is, but he's ECR ranked number 1 on the week over at Fantasy Pros, and I Jordan Poyer.
Oh, I was still talking about linebacker. I'm like, Fred Warner is the number 1.
No, that would be more shocking than Jordan Poyer at number 1. And I don't think it's crazy to think Jordan Poyer can finish as a defensive back 1, as the defensive back 1. I just don't see Atlanta. Honestly, their offense seems to be cratering just a little bit. I mean, if you look at the total snap counts of just the last few weeks, I mean, they had 46 plays last week against a less than stellar Detroit defense. They even against San Francisco, they didn't control too much of that game enough. And my concern with Poyer is that realistically, it's one of those situations where he's not in coverage against. And I think it's probably going to be a Kyle Pitts game, if which is rare to say nowadays, considering Pitts hasn't really exactly. Even though, what do you guys think? Do you think if you're Atlanta, you just get him the 100 and whatever yards it is needed to set the tight end record?
Yep. Is it Shockey's record that he's breaking? Is that correct? Or
it is Mike Ditka's, right?
Oh, Ditka's. Oh,
yeah.
Then yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
Sorry, Mike Ditka. We got mistaken for Jeremy. Now Jeremy Shockey was a stud. I shouldn't even.
Well, he tied Jeremy Shockey's record. I want to say maybe it was a week before. Maybe
that's correct.
Maybe that's what I'm remembering. Sorry about that.
But you guys do. I mean, do you see this playing out the same way? That it's going to be a Kyle Pitts, just extravaganza essentially, and I can see not phasing Jordan Poyer out of the game, but I think with Poyer you need that 8-9 tackle floor to consistently, especially if you're going to finish as the DB1, you need some splash plays, and I don't see the splash play this week per se. I know that's not dynamite analysis for why. And on the heels of, unfortunately, Jordan Poyer being snubbed for the Pro Bowl, which I think is shocking, but
it's poppycock. That's what it is.
It is poppycock. Here we go.
Balderdash.
And I'm on popcorn again. And again, maybe it's just that I've been let down this whole year, and Buda Baker's at 8, and I see Jalen Thompson at 10, and I want to switch those two every single week because Jalen Thompson's given me no reason not to think he deserves to be ranked ahead of Buda Baker. Maybe that's name recognition alone. Again, not too far down on Buda Baker against Dallas, but I think that it's a situation that the name is riding. Because I mean, if you look at what Baker, it's been he said 1 10 tackle game on the season. And that was last week. And so, I mean, again, not bad. It's only sack of the season. So I think we're kind of playing off of recency bias a little bit, more so than not looking at the last 5 weeks where he had 5 tackles, 6 tackles, 4 tackles, 5 tackles. You sprinkle in the interception and the sack, and you take those away, and all of a sudden you have Buda Baker as the DB 65 and 64 on the week. So to be at 8 again, I just have to temper just a little bit. And last but not least, speaking of interceptions, Mike, I think you and I both saw the same thread talking about Rasul Douglas. And Rasul Douglas with Green Bay is very inflated as far as what over the last 5 weeks, I guess it is now. He's the DB1. Everything's predicated on interceptions, on the splash plays. And against Minnesota, we go back to week 11. Kirk Cousins has 7 interceptions on the season. There's, I don't want to say turnover less. I mean, it's possible, but that's the only reason Rasul Douglas is ranked as high as he is, or he's not even on ECR. Take that back. I'm sitting there looking at and here's my hiccup, Mike. Like you had before show, I had thought he was at 16, and that's what it looks like. I wrote it's 46, so he's 44, 46. Still, I'm gonna stick with Rasul Douglas. Don't get hyped about all the talk of him being the DB1 and all these numbers. They're all interception inflated. He'll finish 62 this week. That's where I have him. That's about it. That's 3. Jorge, there. Are you on mute? Yeah.
I think Jorge says, yeah.
That's okay.
Maybe he's letting you talk.
I said from a real football perspective, it's been super impressive what he's been doing since he arrived in Green Bay to even be an alternate for the Pro Bowl. Is alternate for the Pro Bowl? Is that what you said? Or I think he's an alternate for the Pro Bowl. Yeah. Yeah. So crazy what he's done. All right, folks. To learn more about where we are feeling, what we're feeling about.
Jeremy has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Jeremy, I think Darius Leonard's back in. He was activated.
He was activated, and yep.
So
they decided to change the rules on us again, and
exactly.
that made Leonard almost immediately available. And first chance he got,
useless.
Yep. Yeah.
For those of you who survived losing Darius Leonard last week, yeah,
I'd still go Derwin.
Yeah, I would too. I mean,
if you could get a backup, if you could potentially get like a pivot, I might try to get Alohi Gilman if you can, as a backup for James. I'd drop EJ Speed for probably Gilman, and James is inactive. Plop in Gilman because I think Gilman had 6 or 7 tackles last week. So
he did. Well, Gilman also got put on the COVID list.
Did he get put?
He early, yes, he did. So, but here's the thing, Mike. Hold on. So this is on Monday. I reached out to Alohi Gilman to find out if it was a close contact or if it was actually symptomatic, and I got nothing from him. But other people told me it was a close contact. So Alohi Gilman, if you were reading,
are you going IDP detective on us?
Well, are you clinging the IDP world now?
At least you're finding out some health reasons and not accusing somebody of doing something heinous.
No, absolutely not. Yes, exactly.
The police department was not involved in this.
Correct. I did not. No, I saw. He was going to be one of my waiver wire things, and then I 100% in sincerity, I was typing, and I got Alohi Gilman - Los Angeles Chargers, enter or spacer, started writing the article, and then boop, I read and I go, shit, he got placed on COVID. So then I had to look and do some research to find out, but I think he should be okay to play, honestly.
Yeah,
but if it's that whole defensive back group, him and Adderley and all them were all maybe close contact.
Well, there have been a string of COVID activations and injury activations because I've seen Quan Alexander was activated, Demario Davis was activated. I saw Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa had an illness, but they were saying non-COVID related. Logan Wilson has now 2 straight practices. David Long was practicing and wearing the dot in practice. So I was like, okay, that's good news. And I don't know. I think we're going to see like a string of activations. Bolton was activated. So I know with Logan Wilson back, I know Jermaine Pratt got put on, but that will send Pratt back to his normal 60% snap rate. So I think with Logan back, that probably sends Pratt back to kind of that normal, his normal usage.
Thanks for getting us to the championship week, Jermaine. Appreciate it.
I haven't heard anything yet on any of the Redskins linebackers, so I think Holcomb is still on. I know
Holcomb got cleared. He's back on. He's back.
Okay.
Oh, good. Okay.
But yeah, I haven't heard anything yet on Perriman. Because I know Perriman was on it. Pretty much all of the Raider linebackers were put on. So if you're a Divine Diablo owner, I'm praying that nobody comes back because he should feast because like every linebacker, Wright, Perriman, Littleton, Owoso, everybody's on. So,
I will say, speaking of Divine Diablo, I was at that Chiefs game against the Raiders, and I watched him play a lot because I was focusing in, and it was also happenstance that he was in my, I think the waiver article, and we were all talking about him that leading up to that. And I love watching. He was, everywhere. Even though he wasn't necessarily involved with a good handful, 5 or 6 other tackles, he was, a pace away. If you look at the all 22s, you'd see all that. Just he's bigger than he looks. He's kind of lean, but really, I don't know if he has a path to playing time going forward, but I was impressed. But I'm not a scout. I'm a fan who had probably too many beers and was watching him and telling everybody. I was like, "That's Divine Diablo." They're like, "Shut up about Divine Diablo. We get it." Good Lord.
I'll never forget his name, thanks to Nate Markham.
Either with the 12 people around me when I was yelling his name, I'm sure.
Nice. Before we round out the show, I just want to say this is the first time we've had a dedicated IDP show all season long. I just want to thank Mike for joining us and being a part of the show. We hope to have you back again next year. It's been great getting all your insight. You can find all of his insight and information. He's been doing this for years. He's somebody that I've looked up to in the IDP community for a long time, and so it's been a pleasure having you on. You can find his work at 4for4 football. Mike, for somebody, let's say that we're talking to some new people who are new to IDP and are dipping their toes in the water, and they're not in 10-man IDP starting lineups. They're in they have an IDP spot, or they have a couple IDP spots, and they're just dipping their toes in the water. What advice could you send them off with that's saying, hey, you know what? Invest more in IDP going forward?
It's one is not as intimidating as you think it is. And you can make it as complex and as simple as you want it to be. You can play as many IDPs as you want. Don't let outside noise say, hey, you have to play IDP this way or you're not playing it the right way. There is no right or wrong way. The point of fantasy football for any league is to have fun. So set it the way you want it to set. If you want to set it to where you're playing a couple of guys, then that's fine. Dip your toes in and have fun with it and do whatever you want. But like I said, it's not as intimidating as it is. I know I have a pretty hardcore Twitter following, but I don't think it makes up as much, I don't think it makes up as many followers, and I still try to cater to an audience. Like, I don't assume everybody, when I write, I don't assume anybody knows everything. So, don't get caught up in the fact that, oh my God, I need to know what a zone or a too high safety scheme is. It's like, no, we'll talk that stuff, but it really will, guys like me, like Jorge, like Nate, and a bunch of other guys, we'll dumb it down. It's like, yeah, this guy is going to play these amount of snaps. He plays here. This is what's going to make him a good IDP producer. And you know what? For the most part, you can also look at past production, because for the most part, it's, with the exception of maybe even some defensive backs and some defensive linemen, for the most part, especially from a linebacker position, it's pretty consistent, and you kind of know, you can kind of get an idea of who the producers are on a yearly basis. And there's going to be those outliers like Denzel Perriman and Devondre Campbell. But for the most part, when like the good guys are going to be good guys, like Bobby Wagner is going to probably be a top 10 linebacker every year. Darius Leonard, for the most part, is probably going to be a top 10 linebacker. Eric Henderson is going to be a top 10 linebacker. Roquan Smith, all those guys. But set this, talk to your league, set a really simple scoring setting, and then if you find, IDP is fantastic, next year you can up it. But you know what, don't let anybody tell you this is the only way to play IDP. This is, if you don't play it, I'm play fantasy football however you want. If you want to set sacks at 20 points, fantastic. So play however you want to play. It does make you a little bit more of a smarter player. Because you'll pay attention to where your guys are on the field as opposed to just drafting a defensive special teams and a guy gets a sack. That's great, but you'll pay attention a little bit more to where your guys are on the field and where guys are aligned, and you'll come to it with a lot more knowledge and a better football fan, and it's just a more fun way to play. So that's pretty simple. Just play how you want and set it up the way you want, and have fun. And a lot of the guys, like I said, myself, Nate, Jorge, a bunch of the other guys on IDP Twitter, we're here to help and guide you along. And we're not gonna talk down to you. Okay, Bobby Wagner shouldn't be on your waiver. Whatever, you'll deal with that in another year. But have fun with it, and dip your toes in. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. Okay, great.
Yeah, no, exactly. You don't know till you try. Nate, real quick, and hopefully this is a real quick topic. Can you maybe speak to the point of like how playing IDP helps a lot with understanding more of the offensive side of the ball than you would potentially imagine versus being somebody who just plays in an offense only type of league?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the key that a lot of people should do, and this is probably the minority, because I know there's this is a $1 billion industry with millions upon millions of people that pick a fantasy team based off of a magazine exclusively. They don't watch football that much. They just do it to get into a league. And there are people that don't have a clue how to build a narrative. And narrative building to me is the game plan that you take into it. And by narrative, what I mean is if a defense has a shutdown corner and a shutdown, quote unquote, shutdown slot corner, there's a good chance that if I'm the offensive coordinator for that other team, I'm probably going to attack the other side. Most likely, I won't play to the defensive strengths. I'll try to take advantage or exploit their weaknesses. And if you play IDP and you know that A and B are likely to line up against that wide receiver, DFS, that wide receiver 3 that might not necessarily have as week in, week out elevated floor, might do so that week. It's those small advantages, as you put on our IDP about 3 weeks ago. It's a game of inches, as Al Pacino had said. Oh, yeah. So it's fantasy football. It's a game of points, which is such a terrible way to make that.
No, you're right.
But you know what I mean? It's 1 point. 1 point separates. We said, would you rather get blown out or lose by a point? And if that one extra reception, because you build a narrative, because you understand the defensive side, or you look at the linebacking core and their missed tackle rate, and you know that the running back that you have exploits missed tackles, you might lower your ceiling as a whole. It's if you don't even dabble in IDP deep, like Mike is saying exactly. And let me just compound on that. As it 100% what I would say and agree with. I don't care what anybody says. If you play in a league that has just one spot and it's only one IDP and it can be any person, I would rather have everybody start there and get excited and fall, have that week where Devin White puts up 63 points and you go, holy hell, I should pay more attention and, cascade and turn into that. I think it makes you a better overall player, completely by understanding both sides.
No, totally agree with what you guys are saying. And to round us out, one of the things we pride ourselves here at Fantasy and Frames is we understand that in real football, offense and defense matter in winning games, and we feel that that's kind of how we should approach fantasy football, and that's how we tailor our content towards both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And you both said it great. Play how you want to play. Doesn't matter. Just enjoy playing fantasy football. But even if you are somebody who's strictly an offensive person, learning about the defensive mismatches, you know, that goes a long way in helping you on the offensive side of the ball, and you can do that without getting too heavily invested in IDP. Just it's another tool in your arsenal, having a little bit more exposure. So even if you're listening to this pod and you don't play IDP leagues, but you're learning about the defensive mismatches of certain players, hey, that'll help you. And the more exposure you get to IDP, I think it'll make you a more well-rounded fantasy football player in general. And who knows, you may actually pick it up, start a league, and you may actually like it, and then the rest is history. And then we'll be taking your questions each and every week here at Fantasy and Frames and with Mike at 4for4. So for everybody, thank you very much for tuning in all these 17 weeks. We hope you go get your fantasy football titles in your IDP leagues. So for Mike, for Nate, I'm Jorge. We will catch you all real soon. Take it easy.
Good luck, everybody.